OMG, MicroStrategy has announced a special meeting for shareholders because they want to buy 30 times more Bitcoin than originally planned. Michael Saylor really strikes again here. He is even expanding his plan now. Officially, MicroStrategy will let shareholders vote on whether the company can issue an additional 10 billion shares beyond the 2121 plan, 2001, to buy Bitcoin. You are saying here that we implemented our plan much faster than originally expected. So originally, MicroStrategy wanted to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin, and they planned to do it over 3 years. And as it stands now, they've already implemented half of that plan. And now they're basically expanding the whole thing again, looking to dilute more shares to buy even more Bitcoin. And from the looks of things now, they've already implemented half of that plan here. And now they're basically expanding the whole story again, wanting to dilute more shares 2001 in order to buy more Bitcoin. I probably don't need to explain to you that this is ultra bullish for the Bitcoin price. Currently, MicroStrategy is buying more Bitcoin than BlackRock. Just look at this. MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor have become the absolute Bitcoin bank here because they can offer institutional providers a product that is not available anywhere else. They can provide institutional investors access to Bitcoin in the form of a security. And when you think of Bitcoin as a commodity, that's something really, really special, especially with the convertible bonds. The convertible bonds that MicroStrategy is offering here are really selling like hotcakes. We'll dive deeper into that later. We're going to dig a little deeper into this announcement because it says that MicroStrategy is calling a special meeting for shareholders to vote on important proposals. So this is about the plan, and it's important to note that this hasn't been officially decided yet. It's going to be determined among the shareholders whether this goes through or not. But I can tell you right away, all the Bitcoin enthusiasts, or rather the shareholders here at MicroStrategy, they're geared towards increasing Bitcoin per share continuously. So normally, the idea is to present a stock as well as possible in the market so that the stock price goes up and the stock valuation increases. But with MicroStrategy, the essential story here is that they're trying to get more Bitcoin per share. The goal is to present a stock as well as possible in the market so that the stock price goes up and the stock valuation increases. But with MicroStrategy, the 2001 essential story is that they are trying to get more Bitcoin per share. So it's not about pumping the stock price to the moon. The number one goal here is to get more Bitcoin per share. And this has the side effect that MicroStrategy has performed better than any other asset because investors are buying into MicroStrategy, also because they want an indirect stake in Bitcoin, since they don't have easy access to direct Bitcoins like through cold storage solutions or something like that. They don't have easy access to direct Bitcoins like through cold storage solutions or something like that. That's why it's likely that in the future, the Bitcoin per share ratio will keep getting higher through cold storage solutions or something like that. So it's likely that in the future, the Bitcoin per share ratio will keep increasing. And there are now 3 important resolutions. First, they're increasing the authorized shares of Class A from 330 million to 10.33 billion to support future capital raises. So this is really crazy, raising the number of authorized shares from 330 million to 10.33 billion. That's a huge expansion and could indicate that they want to raise a lot more capital, possibly to finance further Bitcoin purchases. So they're not talking about buying Bitcoin just yet, but I mean, you just have to put 2 and 2 together. Of course, they want to buy Bitcoin here. Michael Saylor mentions it in every interview. We want to buy more Bitcoin. We want to buy at the top. We want to buy at the bottom. We just keep buying Bitcoin. There was actually a lot of criticism yesterday when Michael Saylor bought more Bitcoin. I think it was around 8,000 Bitcoin or so, and some people were even speculating, are they buying more? No, they only bought 8,000 Bitcoin, which you have to say now, just 8,000 Bitcoin. El Salvador has about 7,000 Bitcoin, and then MicroStrategy buys 8,000 Bitcoin at once. Think about it. 8,000 Bitcoin, more than 50 Bitcoin, people say that's too little, below expectations. This is basically below expectations here. You just have to accept the circumstances. In 2021, Germany sold some Bitcoin, and when MicroStrategy buys 8,000 Bitcoin, which is actually pretty significant compared to the 50 Bitcoin, people are already saying, wow, that's way too little, that's below expectations. So just think about that. And if MicroStrategy were to buy 30,000 Bitcoin, that would be the kind of normal amounts you'd expect from the investment market at this point. So just think about that. And when MicroStrategy buys 20,000 Bitcoin, those are the kind of normal amounts you'd expect from the investment market at this point. Not too long ago, they had 1%, and now they have 2% of the Bitcoin supply, so they're moving at a pace that's almost hard to imagine. And now there's been criticism because MicroStrategy, or rather, Michael Saylor bought those 8,000 Bitcoin at the top. That came out yesterday, they bought in US dollars, and now some people have gone crazy because they said, hey, you can't buy the top or anything like that here. Michael Saylor buys at any price. Unlike others who hesitate, he commits. MicroStrategy might over-leverage. Saylor nearly led MicroStrategy to collapse during the dot-com bubble. But what do they do when prices are high? They buy. When prices are low, sometimes they don't buy, or the other way around. There are some really crazy stories out there. But Michael Saylor, he talks the talk, but he also walks the walk. And you can really see he's got the guts to back it up because what he's doing is truly massive. A lot of people are now assuming that MicroStrategy is going to become this huge honeypot, that they're over-leveraging themselves, and that it could lead to a new bear market if this whole thing blows up. In 2021, there's always a reminder that Michael Saylor almost brought MicroStrategy to the brink of collapse during the dot-com bubble. And now, attention, there's a second announcement that says they're increasing the authorized preferred shares from 5 million to 1.005 billion. So check out the differences here. And that means it also points to greater flexibility in raising capital. And if these measures are approved, MicroStrategy would theoretically have the ability to raise significantly more capital. Whether they actually want to buy 30 times more Bitcoin depends on how they plan to use this additional capital. It's pretty clear that they want to significantly expand their financial base, which ties into their Bitcoin strategy. And it seems like they're getting ready to potentially make massive investments, which could include buying Bitcoin. So it's not 100% certain that they're going to buy Bitcoin with that, but like I said, it's pretty obvious. So the question is whether they're actually going to buy 30 times more Bitcoin than originally planned. In the third point, change the stock incentive plan for 2023 to grant automatic stocks to 9 directors joining the board. Also, we had the NASDAQ situation where MicroStrategy is now listed on the NASDAQ, bringing more funds. Planned purchases exclude NASDAQ amounts. These are external, raised on top. MicroStrategy is a machine accumulating money to pump and buy Bitcoin. So these additional purchases that are planned aren't even counting the NASDAQ amounts that are still coming into MicroStrategy. These are external things that are supposed to be raised on top of that. So MicroStrategy is like a machine trying to accumulate as much money as possible to pump Bitcoin up and buy as much Bitcoin as they can. You are also welcome to write to me in the comments below what you think the shareholders should vote on here. Well, I've already heard a few voices on Twitter and in X. Most of them say all in, put everything into Bitcoin, dilute everything here that you can, and buy even more Bitcoin here. I think most investors would totally agree if Michael Saylor accumulates even more Bitcoin and finds even more, let's say, very interesting ways to gather even more Bitcoin in 2021. I actually saw a statistic about this earlier. Here you can see how much new capital is flowing into MicroStrategy through the NASDAQ 100, since MicroStrategy is now listed there. So you can see here that when you invest US dollars in the NASDAQ, it breaks down to $982 for Apple, $842 for Nvidia, $828 for Microsoft, and just $42 for MicroStrategy. That might sound like a small amount at first, but we have to keep in mind that MicroStrategy's market capitalization is constantly rising. The more the market capitalization increases, the more flows they receive from NASDAQ. And now something exciting is happening. The next thing on the agenda is that MicroStrategy might get listed in the S&P 500 sooner or later, and that would bring in a whole different level of flows. But for that to happen, MicroStrategy also needs to start making profits, which is why the almost mandatory pools are so important, so we can have fair value accounting, and that's going to be mandatory starting in 2025. So what's brewing here is, on one hand, ultra bullish. It's almost hard to imagine. But on the other hand, it kind of scares me a bit because a really big honeypot is being created here, even though I don't think, for example, that the whole thing is going to collapse like FTX did. I see MicroStrategy differently than FTX, but I do think there are some red flags, like, for example, somehow the whole story falls apart, and afterwards somehow we have the FTX. MicroStrategy differs from FTX, but there are concerns, like Michael Saylor's limited support for self-custody. I'll link a hardware wallet for Bitcoin self-custody. Buying MicroStrategy shares means relying on a third party. For independent Bitcoin management, consider a Trezor wallet. Use code BitcoinHotel for a discount. I prefer buying Bitcoin myself. If you want to leverage Bitcoin by 10% or 20%, consider that option. And if you just say, okay, hey, I want to hold Bitcoin under my own responsibility, I don't want to be dependent on the market sale and so on, then you can simply buy a Trezor hardware wallet. Then you can also get a discount with the code BitcoinHotel, and then you can manage your Bitcoin here independently of exchanges, of MicroStrategy, of BlackRock, and so on. MicroStrategy can be a leverage option, but it changes your tax situation compared to holding Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is a security, Bitcoin is a commodity in the US. Takes on debt and uses leverage strategies, so you can use MicroStrategy as your leverage vehicle. But that has the downside that, tax-wise, you're in a different situation compared to Bitcoin. Because, as I said, when you buy MicroStrategy, it's a security, but when you buy Bitcoin directly, it's considered a commodity, or at least in America, it's a commodity. And that's basically the difference between buying Bitcoin directly and buying MicroStrategy shares. Michael Saylor also said something interesting about this, and it was actually published just a few hours ago on live TV.
Nobody owns it. Once you get the hang of Bitcoin, you'll know how to preserve your wealth and thrive economically. It works for a country, a company, a family, or an individual. Nobody owns it. It's a practical, fair. Entitlement, just something good for the world. That's why I'm so excited about it. So we're giving investors whatever level of risk and performance they're looking for. And there are hundreds of trillions of dollars in the capital markets that absolutely need to buy securities. They can't buy commodities.
Bitcoin is seen as the top choice for saving wealth and improving lives. What he is saying is that Bitcoin is the best vehicle to save wealth here, whether you are a family, an individual, a state, a company, and so on. And now here's the kicker. He says Bitcoin is meant to improve our lives, which is why he's so enthusiastic about it. Pay attention. He says massive amounts of capital must buy securities, like stocks, because their money is just getting inflated away. They can't invest in commodities. They can't just buy gold or Bitcoin. Instead, they have to buy securities. And that's the life hack Michael Saylor is taking advantage of. And they can't, for the love of God, or however you want to put it, they can't invest in commodities. They can't just buy gold or Bitcoin or anything like that. Instead, they have to buy damn securities. And that's basically the life hack that Michael Saylor is taking advantage of. He understood investors' issues. Bitcoin and MicroStrategy address them. Vast sums are involved. Millions, billions, trillions could flow into MicroStrategy due to demand. Convertible bonds were highly sought after. Now, nothing matches their demand. MicroStrategy mitigates volatility, a game changer for investors. He's talking about millions, billions, potentially trillions that could potentially flow into MicroStrategy because there is simply a need for it. And you see it time and again. I mentioned it before, convertible bonds in 2001. Nothing is as in demand right now as these convertible bonds because MicroStrategy also takes the volatility out of the equation. And that's the absolute game changer that many professional investors don't want to deal with. And MicroStrategy says, hey, I'll give you the returns of Bitcoin, but I'll take the volatility out of it. And people are definitely happy to take that deal. And MicroStrategy says, hey, I'll give you the returns of Bitcoin, but I'll take the volatility out of it. And people obviously take that for granted. And that's the crazy part here. And if you still want to buy Bitcoin now, my big recommendation is always to do it right away. Don't buy it through some vehicle like an ETF or MicroStrategy. Maybe take a small stake in MicroStrategy, but for the most part, it really makes sense to hold Bitcoin directly because you get all the benefits. I'll drop a link for you to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe, super safe and simple, and you can get started right away. Then you can transfer the Bitcoin directly to your hardware wallet. I'll drop a link for you below. With 21 Bitcoin, you can also get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin using the code BitcoinHotel. And now let me know what you think about this huge news. See you later. Peace out.